So basically with Lamellar, it is basically just plates, either metal, ABS plastic, leather, that overlap, and you lace it to other plates like that. Or on this case, it's got a leather backing, which gives it a bit more stability. Advantages of this over just having like solid steel like a breastplate is does give a bit more flexibility. Got a bit bend there, almost fold it in half. Somewhat easy to make if you're just doing it indoors. You can just, if you bought your own plates, just mix it up together in your home, easy peasy. You don't need to get your own tools. Doesn't make a lot of noise or mess either, which is good. If you're beginning out, you don't have a big workshop or anything. So in terms of the tools, what you need to get going, basically got here. Obviously need some plates. I bought these several years ago now from a guy in the US called Polar Bear, who's not Polar Bear Forge. It's not trading anymore, which is a shame. But these are just a fairly standard tombstone shaped plate with the holes in, and they're made of stainless steel because I don't want to mess about however often derusting all these tiny plates and taking everything apart. You can, as I say, get them or make them as plastic. I think there's some talk in Agnes's class yesterday about the website Plastic Lamellar. And it was a plastic Lamellar, which you can just get pre-cut plastic plates. I think in this shape and then a few others. But they've all got the same basic kind of hole layout. I used got like 2 holes at the bottom, 2 holes at the bottom, 2 holes either side. This one's just got 1 hole, but 2 holes at the top. Doesn't make any real difference to the lacing pattern. So the lacing basically works the same no matter what you do. There are other plates, other styles of plates, depending on what period or what kind of region you're looking at. But for the most part, the plates are just going to fit this shape, and as I say, the lacing is going to be the same. The obscure ones I've not really seen anyone doing in terms of like selling them as like pre-made things, so you're gonna have to make them yourself, which is a bit of a challenge in the sense it's going to take a lot of time. So that was the plates. Other things you will need will be lacing. For this one, I've just got leather. That's about 3mm paracord or just cotton cord. I tend to favour the leather cording because it's stronger. I think the first set I ever made when I first started about 10 years ago, which was just made of artificial sinew for the lacing, and took it to Raglan, and over the course of a week it started to slowly disintegrate to the point where it was just held on by a couple of plates and it wasn't really doing me any protection at all, apart from where I'd actually repaired it with hastily cut strips of leather, which I had to hand. So that's where I thought, ooh, maybe that's an idea, making it all with the leather cord. With the leather actually as well, because it's a bit more rigid than paracord, you don't need to have anything really to thread it through like a needle. You can actually just pop it through the hole, like distance that quite easily without having to use a needle. You just whack it through and then whack it through again. That's all jobs are good one. So that would be if you're doing like basic, very, very basic. All you really need is plates and a cord. Probably would need some strapping as well. Don't think any of the other classes this weekend have talked about strapping on leatherwork as much. I didn't really plan for, but never mind. On this, I've just got a couple of straps that I made a while ago, which is strip on leather with a buckle sewn over it, and that's basically all you need to strap. And then, yeah. So when you actually come to making the Lamellar itself, you're going to want to start by measuring out your dimensions. Probably best doing this over padding, whatever padding you're going to wear underneath. And you're going to want to measure a few points on yourself. First one being the space between or across your chest, mainly. I normally go from like nipple to nipple, and then from collarbone to the nipple to the waist, and then around either your hips or the chest, whichever's wider, or whichever one you're going to go down to. That's going to be a basic measurements, and that will pretty much carry through the rest of the construction. So what you do with that, did have a diagram roughly in my head for that, which I'll be able to put in class notes at some point. Post out when I get home. So yeah, so you're taking those measurements and you lay out the plates to fit that. So for the across each, I would need, is that about 7 or 8 inches for me? 8, yeah, about 8, yeah. So I measure out 8 inches worth of the plates. Remembering to overlap because the lacing goes through each one. And luckily that actually comes to about 8 inches, which is nice because sometimes it gets to like about 1.25 inches around it. So that you've got the 8 inches. I'm not showing up yet. So that's the points made over for that as the 8 inches. That will work across the chest. For me, then basically do is take your cord and then just lace it through each one. Probably be wise just to cut off the length of cord first. That's basically just take that measurement that you did for the chest or whichever piece you're working with, and then add another half to that, I'd say normally. 8, 4, yeah, and cut that off. And then just crack on with the lacing. Again with that, I'm not sure I'll see that, I'll lace it a bit then. Drop to the camera. And then that's the basic lace pattern you're working. So it basically goes in one side, up the other, and then back, goes down, back up again, and repeats. That's basically all you're just going to need to do for the rest of the row and all the other rows for going across. It's 95% repetition. So there's not a great deal of technique involved in making it. So once you've completed your row, like I've done on these two, which again is about the same with the plates, you basically do that for however many it takes to do that second measurement from the collarbone to the nipple, which happens to be about 2 rows for me. Again, might depend on the type of plate you're using. The measurements normally when you buy them will be on the site. I think on plastic Lamellar it gives you a kind of chart where you can put in the measurements itself, and that will give you the amount of plates you're going to need for the particular build, which is going to be handy. So yeah, and then lace it together, Slightly different for this one, but it's again basically in and out, in and out, in and out. Demonstrate that again. So that's in effect the basic Lamellar build, and you put the straps on the ends to carry it over. This, another measurement is probably just going to be over the shoulders. I normally measure from the kind of point where your shoulder is to about the nipple area again. That seems to come up a lot, just to get the kind of strap length overall, and that will be your buckle and strap measurements. And then you can just adjust it. You'll be able to adjust the strapping to fit more snugly there. That one. So that's basically the top piece that you make. You then take the measurement for around the body or around the hips or the chest again, whichever's wider for a particular person, and then repeat the process again, making a strip, and then repeat that down to however many it takes to do that distance from nipple to hip, and that's you basically done in effect. That would make you fairly simple, ready to go Lamellar kit. Again, no thrills, no spills, as it were. What makes it look better, makes it look more fancy, is when it's got edging on it or particular backing. This one on my shoulder, I just took a piece of, I think that's about 2 mil thick, which is probably a bit overkill. 2 mil thick leather, measured around, use that as an example. Took the measurement from around here on the base of the plates, about where the holes end, and then took it to the other, same on the other side. Can't really get this angle there. And then cut that out of leather, and then just punch holes in and stitch it across. If you're doing that, or if you're doing backing, you probably need a few additional tools for working on leather. Can just be cutting board and a Stanley knife, which you can pick up wherever. Wicks, most DIY stores. Alternatively, you can go for a strap cutter, which I got from Lacrevo for, I don't think it costs that much, about £15 or something like that, off the top of my head. That you basically just a bit easier to cut with, because you can set your width on there if it'll focus in. You set the gauge with this little screw. I'll set it to about 1 inch. So 1 inch. And then you can feed in the leather through that gap. It will do that. Then you feed that through and goes onto the blade inside the cutter. Sometimes does need a bit of force to get going. Just a bit like that. It could be a bit blunt. Oh yeah, start off with that. For that, you then just pull through leather. That is basically a strap cut. You can take the remainder off using a Stanley knife. A lot easier if you're doing a long piece of leather for like around the waist, so you don't end up being on the floor like I was at home trying to cut out a piece of leather about 5 feet diameter over a chopping board, and then realizing, oh, I've run out of chopping board now. Rest of my carpet that I'm now slicing through with a stone knife, and that doesn't go down well onto a desk. So that basically cuts you out a strap very easily, or again, you can use that for, like I was here, for cutting out a backing piece or a new rope. And it's just a lot quicker and easier. Still time consuming if you're doing that, because punching all these holes, even through leather and with a leather punch, is a bit of work.
How did you measure out the holes then to get them precise?
With the holes, once I got the strap band laid out, basically just laid out the points on there. So where I got to, up here. So I marked that out. Just laid them out like I did. Just measuring the normal basic Lamellar out, and then just Sharpie and point out where they need to go. And then set to punching. With the leather punch, this one's a bit more high end, but you can get these from, again, like Prevo. I got this one from originally, or I think you can get them from other like DIY or crafty shops as well. Pretty handy. Just so I've marked the leather, put it on, punch, and then that's the hole. Normally when I do that, as I've got another kind of waster piece of leather behind it, and that just sits in between the workpiece and the leather punch, and that just saves the punch from blunting itself on the anvil over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of holes, which does happen. So that's basically how I've ended up making mine. On my shoulder piece, you see it kind of fits in with actual other metalwork as well to give it that finish, which is just the style I went for. Thing to consider on Lamellar is probably research a bit beforehand the actual period or region of armour you want to make, because it's used everywhere, basically all over Europe. You've got Byzantine Empire, Russia, Avars, and it goes right across to styles in China and Indonesia, Japan. So it's well used. So finding the right plate or kind of lacing pattern is probably a good idea to start with, the right kind of kit you're looking for. Most of the plates, I think, are more European ones. The ones like mine are more of a Byzantine style. The ones that you also see, I think, a Visby style, which are a bit more like a curvy on the outside, like that. I think it's more like the ones that Agnes has on hers. But that's, again, same basic lacing pattern, just repeated along. Otherwise, there's not a lot to it. It's mainly based on lacing. There are some ways you can do it where, particularly on later Byzantine periods, didn't see that message there, sorry. Particularly on later Byzantine periods, from like 10th century onwards, you start riveting the points on. For SCA purposes, that's a bit overkill, because riveting points on and lacing them, you don't really need that. It's going to be fine just as it is with the lacing. You're basically in effect making a inside out brigandine that you're also going to be lacing together, so a bit overkill. And a lot of points that you buy don't actually have those rivet holes in there, so that's going to be a case of making your own, or trying to find someone that will make them custom for you, which might be a bit expensive. One Were there any questions up to this point? Just throwing that out there to make sure I've got everyone still roughly on the same page that I'm on.
I've got a question about the plates themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So when you buy them, how do they turn up? Do you need to do any finishing on them, or like, can you use them straight out the box?
Speaking from experience, ones like the plastic ones, I imagine you would just be able to use them straight on the box. In a way, you can with these, but in a way, not.
On your presentation.
If it's about, just to make sure I'm not missing anything on it. I have some notes.
Yeah. Do you want me to log it into Zoom? Run through it. Have you done the practical bit now?
Yeah, that's got it.
Cool. Right, give us 2 minutes and we'll get this presentation up.
Cool. Yeah, that was basically the practical side of it on there. As I say, most of the practical side of Lamellar is just repeating that lacing pattern over and over again until it's done.
Right. Just going to take me a couple of minutes.
Why did they start riveting why did the Byzantines start riveting the bottom of the lamellar plates? I thought they would make it more rigid, which is sort of not really what you want for lamellar.
Because with the Byzantine ones, it's basically riveted onto the leather backing. So if you're fighting with steel weapons, as you're obviously going through the fight, then you run the risk of the lacing just being severed by like sword blows. If it's riveted on as well, you kind of avoid that risk, which is why for SCA purposes it's kind of obsolete, because you're not actually fighting with steel or sharp weapons. So again, it's a nice finish and it's nice to look, but it depends if you want to put that time and effort in, or add the extra weight of however many 100 rivets onto your kits to be able to get that look. Me, not so much. Right, cool. So the slides that I've got after the practical side, basically just a bit of a rundown of what the Lamellar is. So as I say, it's just a series of overlapping plates that you're lacing together, in some cases riveting as well. Range of cultures, as I mentioned, you've got all the way from like Westernish or Europe at least over to the Far East, in a range of different plate sizes and shapes. Which does give you a good variety of kits and personas you can work to without having to adjust your tool setup too much. And as I say, you're able to get hold of pre-cut plates, and it does make the job a lot easier and a lot more doable from a beginner point of view. So I think the first kit I actually made at home was just pre-bought plates from Polar Bear, and then spending a few weeks technically at home just lacing them through to make a kit without much in the way of expertise or tools involved, which is very handy for a start. So I've got some pros and cons. As I say, pretty simple to construct if you've got unlimited tool setup or workshop setup. You can just do it at home, put Netflix on, hit autoplay, and in away you go lacing. As long as you're paying attention to what you're doing, you should do all right. There's Netflix and Lamellar, is that? Yeah, Netflix. Yeah, that's it. So as I say, as long as you're paying attention to what you're doing, you should be okay. Because I've done plenty of times is as you're doing the overlap, you end up doing a few plates backwards, and you realise at the end of the row and think, oh no, I've got to do the whole row again because I've messed up halfway through. As I mentioned before, it can be applied to a series of a variety of kits and personas, giving you some versatility. You can quite easily modify it if you're just adding on plates to the end. It's just as simple as like pull back the lacing a little way, and then lace on the additional plates if you're trying to expand it, or for taking it back and shrinking it, just lace some plates on the ends, and jobs are good, and you've shrunk your kit down. You don't need to go ahead grinding off bits of steel or cutting new plates or anything like that. That's quite handy. The range of materials as well, again, is quite good. The plates you can make out of or buy out of plastic, steel, ABS, leather. The lacing as well, that can be arranged from like leather cord, cotton cord, paracord, or artificial sinew, which again gives you a variety of different qualities and looks. And if you're using things like plastics, then it can be quite lightweight, and you can just stick it under like a cotton tunic, linen tunic, and then you've got rigid protection, which you can quite easily hide. Cons to that is if you're making your own plates, well, it's a quite simple process. It's basically using the techniques that Alex went through of basically cutting out your plates with a metal shears or a grinder or a jigsaw, and then punching it using a Whitney punch or a drill. Over the course of, say you need 250 plates for a set, that's going to take you many, many hours, and it's going to be a bit tedious, and you've got to really commit to it. In terms of protection, it does give you quite a good amount of protection. I've not had any issues with mine so far, but it's not quite as good as what you get from like a rigid coat of plates like a Visby or a solid steel breastplate. I mentioned before with the lacing, it's not going to be cut by any of the actual weapons we're using, but with the metal plates in particular, because the edges can be quite severe, that can actually cause over time a bit of wear to the cord. So you might need to relace it every couple of years, maybe even less than that, maybe even more than that, every 3 years or so. But that's not a big job comparative to having to hammer out new plates or making new plates out of steel and so on. So a bit more about the materials. We've got some pros and cons to the different plate materials. You've got steel. If you're going for stainless, which I have on mine, it does avoid the rusting problem, so you can get a very nice shiny kit if that's the kind of finish you're looking for. Mild steel also works. To be fair, the mild steel won't actually rust up that much because the plates are going to be moving across each other, and they'll act as almost like its own sandpaper, just keeping a lot of the rust off. So you can just get away with it as long as you're keeping it dry. That shouldn't be too much of an issue. You can make them out of aluminium, which gives you a similar sort of finish, but it's a bit lighter and not as prone to rusting as steel anyway. Leather, you got a nice look to that. It can be coloured if you're using various coloured dyes and paints. I've been thinking in the back of my mind about making a rainbow style of leather, which I'm seriously considering for my next one. Just making it like a rainbow down, which would be quite cool. However, on period that might be, but that's another thing. And then I'll say plastic ABS, that's quite a lightweight option. Gives good protection, but it's not a period look if you're wanting to go for that. But you can, as I say, just use that underneath a tunic or other clothing and get that hidden quite well. The lacing, that's going to be, as I say, leather, nice strong period option there. But it can be expensive. I've normally just trawled through my Prevo or other like leather sites every now and then, just looking to see if I've got thonging on offer. Because if I've got a decent thickness, like a 2 or 3 mil for half price or so, then yeah, just snatch that up. I normally just put it on half price because it's not the right kind of colour they want, or they've got too much. So it's good to grab that if you can. Paracord, again, that's a good option for like modern periods, modern materials. It's very strong, probably a bit cheaper than leather, but not quite period there. Silk is very period and is a nice bragging right because you can say, oh, it's silk. But it's very expensive, and if it breaks, then that's not going to be pleasant to have to fork out to replace. In terms of the diameters for these, you're probably just going to be looking at about 3 mil diameter. You can go smaller and just lace it back on itself to get a bit more a bit more strength out of it, but 3mm for any of those should be absolutely fine to fit through. And then the backing, I've gone overkill on mine and gone for about 3 or 4mm leather, but a thinner one, like a 1 or 2mm, that should be absolutely fine as well. And then the tools, a lot of that is most of what I showed earlier. You've got a pair of scissors to cut the likes of the cording. Don't use any fabric scissors, as many will probably be aware. Stanley knife or strap cutter if you're going to be making your own straps, or making the leather edging or the backing, and then cutting mat and a large eye needle for lacing through if you're using things like paracord. I've not been able to find a needle yet that's got an eye big enough for 3mm paracord. There probably is one out there, but not one I've found. An alternative you can do is just, if it's an artificial stinger, you can just burn the end with a laser. That gives you a solid head to poke through, or just wrap it in tape, and that gives you a bit more stability to it as you're threading through. Most of the optional extras I've put there are for if you're doing like making your own plates, or either as on leather or steel, or if you're trying to rivet on the plates to the leather backing, you'll have a small hammer or little hard surface to rivet onto. Next, and that's just the measurements. So you've got again the point across the chest, point up to the collarbone, point from the nipple down to the hip, and then around, a little chap there, and then that measurement across the shoulder. And this is basically just the practical side of it. For this one, I did it as if I was doing it with the leather backing. So you lay out the plates equivalent to the length that you're going to be making. For example, if you're doing it around the body, remembering to overlap them. So that's just so you can get a good feel of how wide it's actually going to be, because the plates are going to be their own set dimensions. So it's 3 inches tall and 1.5 inches wide. So obviously the measurement that I'm taking from around my waist might not match into that dimension, so you'd have to round up or round down a bit. It'd be best to round up just to get the plates right. So if you're cutting the leather, make sure you lay out the plates first so you've got a good idea of actually what length it is going to be, and then cut that out. Mark out again the plates on there, mark out the holes, punch said holes, got your leather cut out, and then get to lacing, which is this wee pattern down here. That one I just found on Google, which is, I think, public domain, so I can keep it on there. So if you get stuck with it, then you can just refer to that, and that is, as I say, basically the same pattern for every plate that you can get nowadays commercially, because it's the same basic setup with the holes of 2 up, 2 down, and then 2 on each side, which lace together the same way. And here's just a few other things you can do as extras. I mentioned before, leather backing, which does give a bit more rigidity, but does add weight, especially if you're going a bit overkill like I did and doing for like 3 or 4mm thick leather, which is a bit mad. If you're going for like a 1mm thick, then it shouldn't add too much more weight on and still give you that bit of structure and support to the plates, which can be nice to keep it in that shape. And there's the riveting on plates as well to that backing, which if you're really committed for that period work for the Byzantines, then you can do if you've got the right plates for that. And here is how it might look, which I showed a bit earlier. Yep. So again, that is the shoulder with the solid steel piece on the top. Also, we've got an actual a bit of a pain to hold up. Mind it. That's better. Yeah, so you see with that one, you've got the front and back pieces, which I'll just strap together at the sides. You can, if you wanted, just do them as individual panels, so you've got front and the back separate. Yeah, front and the back separate, which you just buckle on each end, which has a bit of an advantage of you can adjust it a lot easier for if you put on a few pounds of lockdown, or if you want to pack it flat in the car, it just lies flat. With that one, not as much because it doesn't quite fall in half, but it just lies flat in the end, which is another bonus. Instead of having a big bulky breastplate that you can't really do a lot with apart from trying to slot stuff inside it, you can just lay that on the boot of your car and it takes up no room, which is great for them long car journeys to Adelaide. What we've got on these as well is the tassets, which offer a bit of extra protection. They come around the side a bit as well to cover against any sneaky butt wraps. I do actually have rigid arm underneath that. It's just a bit of a bonus, really. But that, if you don't mind getting hit in the leg so much, just that by itself should be sufficient just to take the edge off. Okay, that was about all I had on that one. If there's any other questions or comments, queries?
It was really helpful, class. I hope that you'll make the presentation available because I'll be putting that in my important files and consulting it, when I do my next Lamellar piece.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it will be. I've got a few extra bits to add onto it, like different sites on there, but yeah, that's I'll be adding that up probably later on tonight when I get home, just for viewing pleasure.
For shoulder protections,
Yeah.
you've obviously just got the strap,
Hmm.
but is there a way they've actually put the lamellar plates going over the shoulder straps?
Yeah, so you can do that either two ways. You have them facing across, right, just like that, and track that across on a plate.
Yeah.
For that, I'd probably have that with a backing to it as well. You can do it the other way, going wide. I used to have that, but I found it a bit more restrictive on the shoulders and the arm movement.
You don't want to be stopping your deltoid coming past there, do you?
That was pretty much it because it ended up just digging into my arm like that. But it does give you a nice bit of protection on collarbone actually, which is handy. The lacing shouldn't make much difference into actual speed of construction. I'd say probably if you're going for it, probably something like a paracord or cotton cord would be easy to get hold of quickly and for less money. Definitely not going for silk for loaner gear because it's only loaner gear. The leather cord, I say you can get it relatively easily, but it is more expensive. So for loaner, probably best just go for the cotton cord. The size of plates, the size of plates are pretty standard. It's mainly for shapes that will actually be different. I think that the sizes might differ a little bit, but for most of the ones that you get, they are just going to be around this sort of dimension of a 3-inch tall, about 1 inch or so wide. So that's not going to make too much difference on that one. In terms of the typing of the plate, that's again just purely personal preference. So because it is so widely used, you can just go for any plate really. It doesn't make a great deal of difference if you're just doing loaner gear. As it happens, I've got about 200 or 300 spare plates, so if anyone wants them or any I'm making, then yeah, give us a shout because I have no idea what else to do with them. There is that, yeah. I would say as well with the plates, if you're going for the steel ones, don't think you'll be clever and get hardened stainless steel at a massive expense, thinking it's going to last forever and never bend or break, because it will. I've got hardened stainless steel on mine, and yeah, within a few practices, yeah, they're still buckling and bending, which yeah, just disproves my entire theory there. Cheers for coming and indulging in me rambling about some Lamellar for 45 minutes. So,
Thank you very much.
thank you.